Chapter 78. After the Victory. From Jirana the Prophet made the lesser pilgrimage and then returned to Medina. Shortly before his arrival he was overtaken by Urwa of Thaqif, the man who had been so impressed at Hudaybiyah by the reverence of the Muslims for their leader. Urwa had been absent in the Yemen during the recent campaign, and the accounts which he had heard on his return of the miraculous victory of Hunain had brought to fullness his already half-formed intention to pledge his allegiance to the Prophet. Having done so, he now asked his permission to return to Ta'if and summon the people of Thaqif to Islam. "They will slay you," said the Prophet. "O Messenger of God," said Urwa, "I am dearer to them than their firstborn." "They will slay you," reiterated the Prophet. But when Urwa asked his permission a third time, he said, "Then go if you will." It was as the Prophet had said. They surrounded his house with archers, and it was not long before he was mortally wounded by an arrow. His family asked him, as he was dying, what he thought of his death, and he said, "It is a grace which God in his bounty has given me." Then he told them to bury him with the martyrs who had recently been killed while besieging Ta'if, and they did so. When the Prophet was told of his death, he said, "Urwa is even as the man of Yasin. He summoned his people unto God, and they slew him." The man was Habib, a carpenter of Antioch, who summoned his people to accept the message of Jesus after they had driven away the Apostle Peter and others. They killed him. And in the words of the Quran, it was said to him, "Enter paradise." He said, "Oh, that my people knew how God has forgiven my sins and lavished upon me his bounty." After Urwa's death, his son and his nephew left Taif and came to the Prophet in Medina, where they entered Islam and lived with their cousin Mughira, who was one of the emigrants. The death of Abd Allah ibn Rawaha at Muta had deprived the Prophet not only of one of his valued companions, but also of a valued poet, for he is said to have considered the verses of Abd Allah as equal to those of Hassan and of Ka'b ibn Malik. But by general consent, there were two Arab poets at that time who outshone all the others. One of these was Labid, the second was another Ka'b, the son of one of the chief poets of the previous generation, Zuhayr ibn Abi Salma. Although he was a man of Muzayna, Ka'b had spent most of his life with Ghatafan, and had therefore not come under the Islamic influence which was so powerful in his own tribe. His brother Bujair had entered Islam after Hudaybiyah, but Ka'b vociferously rejected the new religion and wrote satirical verses against the Prophet, who let it be known that anyone who killed the offender would be doing a service to the cause of God. Bujair had already, but in vain, urged his brother to go to the Prophet and ask his forgiveness. "He slays not him who comes unto him in repentance," he had said, and now, after the victory of Mecca, he followed up his previous messages with a poem in which were the lines, "Alone unto God, not to Uzza nor Lat, can be your escape, if escape you can. On a day when escape there is none, no fleeing from men, save for him whose heart is pure in submission to God." With new multitudinous entries into Islam on all sides, Ka'b felt as if the earth were closing in upon him, and in fear of his life he went to Medina, to the house of a man of Juhayna, a friend of his, to whom he made his profession of Islam. The next day he joined the congregation in the mosque for the dawn prayer, after which he went to the Prophet and put his hand in his, saying, "O Messenger of God, if Ka'b the son of Zuhayr came unto you in repentance, a Muslim, asking you to grant him immunity, would you receive him if I brought him unto you?" And when the Prophet answered that he would, Ka'b said, "I, O Messenger of God, am Ka'b the son of Zuhayr." One of the helpers leapt to his feet and asked to be allowed to cut off his head, but the Prophet said, "Let him be, for he has come in repentance, and is no longer as he was." Then Ka'b recited an ode which he had composed for the occasion. It was in the traditional Bedouin style, splendid in diction and highly melodious, with many vivid descriptions of nature, but the gist of it was to beg forgiveness. It ended with a passage in praise of the Prophet and the emigrants, which begins, "The messenger, a light is, source of light, an Indian blade, a drawn sword of God's swords, amid Quraysh companions, when they chose. Islam in Mecca's veil, men said, be gone. They went, not weaklings, not as men that flee, swaying upon their mounts and poorly armed, but heroes proud and noble of mien, bright clad, in mail of David's weave for the encounter. When he had finished, the Prophet drew off his striped Yemeni cloak and threw it over the shoulders of the poet in recognition of his mastery of language. But he said afterwards to one of his companions, had he but spoken well of the helpers, for verily they deserve it. And this was reported to Ka'b, who composed another poem in praise of the helpers, dwelling on their prowess and bravery in battle, the surety of their protection, and their generosity as hosts. It was now clear that they had not long to wait for the birth of Mariah's child. Salma, who had attended on Khadijah at the birth of all her children, was now an elderly woman. It was 25 years since she had helped to bring Fatima into the world. But she nonetheless insisted that she would do the same for this new child of the Prophet. So when the birth was thought to be imminent, she moved to the quarter where Maria lived in Upper Medina. The child was born at night, and that same night Gabriel had come to the Prophet and addressed him as never before, O father of Ibrahim. Immediately after the birth, Salma sent her husband, Abu Rafi, to tell the Prophet that he had a son, and the next morning at the mosque, after the dawn prayer, the Prophet told his companions of the birth. And I have named him, he added, by the name of my father, Ibrahim. There was great rejoicing in Medina and strong rivalry among the women of the helpers as to who should be the foster mother. The choice fell on the wife of a blacksmith in Upper Medina who lived near the babe's mother, and the Prophet would visit his son nearly every day and would often take his siesta there. Sometimes Ibrahim was brought to his father's house. Aisha said that one day the Prophet brought him to her in his arms and said, Behold his likeness unto me. I see no likeness, she said. Do you not see how fair of skin he is, and how fine of flesh? Said the Prophet. All that are fed on the milk of ewes are plump and fair of skin, she answered. One of the shepherds had instructions to send milk every day to the child's foster mother. The Prophet stayed 6 months in Medina after his return from Mecca, and during that time he sent out several small expeditions. One of these, under the leadership of Ali, was against the tribe of Tai, whose territory lay to the northeast of Medina. Ali had previously been sent to destroy the shrine of Manat at Qudayd on the Red Sea, so that of Arabia's 3 principal centers of idolatry, only the shrine of Allat at Taif now remained. But the Temple of Fools was a center of idol worship for those of the people of Tai who were not Christian, and the main object of this present raid was to destroy that temple. Tai was the tribe of the poet Hatim. His son Adi, a Christian like his father, had succeeded him on his death as chief of the tribe. At the sudden approach of Ali and his men, Adi escaped with his immediate family except for one of his sisters, who was taken captive with many others of the tribe. When she was brought before the Prophet in Medina, she threw herself at his feet and begged him to set her free. My father would ever free the captive, she said. Lodge well the guest, feed full the hungry, and comfort the distressed. Nor turned he ever away the seeker of a boon. I am the daughter of Hatim. The Prophet answered her with kind words, and turning to those about him he said, Let her go, for her father loved noble ways, and God likewise loves them. Meanwhile, A man of her tribe had come to ask for her release, and the Prophet put her in his charge, giving her a camel and fine raiment. She went in search of her brother Adi and persuaded him to go to Medina. There he entered Islam, pledging his allegiance to the Prophet, who confirmed his chieftaincy of Tai, and he proved thereafter to be a faithful and influential ally. It was during these same months, at the beginning of Rajab, that word of the death of the Negus came to the Prophet. After the next ritual prayer to be prayed in the mosque, he turned to the congregation and said, "This day a righteous man has died. Therefore arise and pray for your brother Ashama." Then he led them in the funeral prayer. Reports came later from Abyssinia that a light was constantly seen shining over the king's grave.